Ever wonder how a shopping app that everyone used, and no one trusted, lost 99% of its value? Wish was once bigger than eBay, with billions in revenue and a secret offer from Amazon. But behind the scenes, it was bleeding money, scamming users, and making one bad bet after another. Stick around, because what happened to Wish isn't just a failure, it's a warning. Before it was the internet's biggest joke, before it got sold for scraps, and long before Jeff Bezos came calling, Wish was just a strange little idea sitting on a laptop in a cramped San Francisco apartment. It all started with Piotr Szulczewski, a quiet, analytical guy who looked more like a data scientist than a CEO, which makes sense, because that's exactly what he was. Born in Poland, raised in Canada, and educated in computer engineering, Piotr ended up working at Google, where he spent his days fine-tuning one of the most powerful advertising systems in the world, Google Ads. His job? Figure out what you might want to buy based on what you were doing online. Your searches, your clicks, your habits. He helped build the very backbone of the modern internet economy, targeting people with the right ad at the right time, even if they didn't know they wanted something yet. And then, one day, he quit. He didn't leave Google with a bold pitch deck or a team of co-founders. He just wanted to build something of his own. And for 6 months, he disappeared into his apartment, coding, alone. What came out wasn't a store. It wasn't even really a business. It was more like a prototype, a bare-bones website called wishwall.me. And it was weird. There was no checkout, no cart, no credit cards, just a bunch of low-cost products, random gadgets, knockoff electronics, fake luxury watches, all thrown together like a digital flea market. Users could scroll through the listings and click Wish on anything they liked. That's it. No buying, no shipping, just wishing. And somehow, it took off. People spent hours scrolling through the bizarre product catalog, clicking wish after wish. It was like the Instagram of window shopping. Cheap headphones, LED shoelaces, eyebrow tattoo pens. The more random, the better. Users weren't necessarily serious shoppers, but they were engaged, and that was the point. Because Piotr wasn't trying to sell things, he was collecting data. Every click, every wish list, every scroll told him something. What colors people liked, what price points got attention, what kind of products went viral, and pretty soon, that data started to look valuable. He realized that he didn't need to stock inventory or run warehouses. Instead, he could act as a matchmaker between two groups: Western consumers hungry for cheap deals, and Chinese factories drowning in inventory with no global customers. So he reached out to suppliers in China, pitched them on a wild idea. I have the traffic, you have the goods, give me a discount, and I'll deliver customers. At first, people were skeptical, but once the first few factories saw the numbers coming in, they got on board. No commission, no middleman markup, just volume. And that's when Wish as we know it was born. Suddenly, the platform exploded with listings, hundreds of new products every day, thousands of sellers, everything from phone cases to fake AirPods to, well, things we probably shouldn't describe on a family-friendly channel. The strategy was clear. Don't compete on quality, compete on price. And in a world where Amazon was dominating with speed, trust, and convenience, Piotr saw an opportunity to win in the exact opposite direction. Instead of fast shipping, ultra-low prices, instead of polished branding, clickbait ads, instead of quality control, quantity control. It was messy, it was chaotic, and it worked. By 2015, Wish had become one of the most downloaded shopping apps on the planet. It wasn't just cheap, it was weird, and that weirdness was part of the appeal. You didn't go to Wish to get what you needed. You went to Wish to find something you didn't even know existed. It was a digital impulse buy machine, and the algorithm knew exactly what button to push to keep you hooked. Meanwhile, investors were drooling. The company raised over $1 billion in funding. Their user base was growing by 100 million new users every year. They were doing over $1.9 billion in revenue. And all of this from a company that didn't actually sell anything itself. But behind the scenes, there were already warning signs. Sellers were slipping through the cracks. Shipping took weeks, sometimes months. The app design looked like it hadn't been updated since 2010. And user complaints were starting to pile up. Still, none of that mattered. Not yet. Because to the outside world, Wish was a rocket ship. And Piotr Szulczewski, he was the quiet engineer who had outsmarted the whole e-commerce game, with no inventory, no warehouses, and barely any staff. But what no one knew was that the very system Piotr had built, the thing that made Wish grow so fast, was also the reason it would one day crash. Because when you build a business on attention, you're one competitor away from disappearing. By 2016, Wish was no longer some quirky underdog. It was a full-blown unicorn, valued at billions, featured on billboards, and sitting comfortably at the top of the App Store charts. To most people, it still looked like a dollar store knockoff generator, but in Silicon Valley, it was gold. Investors saw a platform that could scale endlessly. No inventory, no logistics, just traffic, data, and deals, and most of all, momentum. But here's what most people didn't know. The company was operating on a razor's edge. Wish wasn't profitable, not even close. But that was part of the plan, at least in the startup world. See, in tech, there's this idea: grow fast, spend big, and monetize later. It's what Facebook did. It's what Uber tried to do. And it's what investors expected Wish to do. So Piotr kept growing. More users, more categories, more weird products. And soon, the company got an invitation, a private one, from Amazon. In 2016, Piotr Szulczewski was invited to a closed-door meeting with Jeff Bezos at Amazon HQ. There were NDAs, lawyers, an agenda that no one would discuss publicly. But insiders knew what it was: an acquisition pitch. Amazon wanted Wish. They'd seen the traffic. They'd seen the ad strategy. They wanted in, not just for the user base, but for the tech behind it. Piotr's predictive algorithm was next level. It could match users with products based on behavior, not just search. And in e-commerce, that's power. And the number Bezos put on the table, $10 billion. Let's pause for a second. At the time, Wish was valued by investors at about $3 billion. The offer from Amazon was more than triple that. This wasn't just a good deal, it was life-changing. Most founders would have jumped at it, cashed out, retired, bought a small island, and disappeared. But not Piotr. He said no. He turned down $10 billion from the richest man on the planet and walked away. Why? Because he believed Wish could be bigger than Amazon's marketplace. He wasn't trying to build the next Etsy or eBay. He wanted Walmart-level dominance. But online, without the overhead, he thought he could take the platform to $100 billion in gross sales, and that it would become the destination for low-cost shopping around the world. And to be fair, it didn't sound crazy at the time. Wish was the most downloaded shopping app on Earth. It was racking up 100 million new users per year. In countries across Europe and Latin America, it was beating Amazon in installs. And later, when Wish went public, it raised another $1.1 billion in its IPO, pushing its valuation to $14 billion. So yeah, for a moment, it looked like Piotr had made the right call, but momentum has a dark side. See, when you say no to $10 billion, people start expecting you to build something worth more. Investors get impatient. The media starts digging. Users expect better. And every bug, every late shipment, every bad review starts to matter a lot more. Piotr had bet everything on scale. But what he didn't realize was that scale without loyalty is just noise, and the same tactics that made Wish grow so fast, cheap prices, weird ads, and a hands-off approach to quality, were about to turn into a liability. Because when the cracks finally started to show, they weren't small. And in the next part, we'll break down how those cracks became a full-blown collapse, and why, despite billions in revenue, Wish was already circling the drain. At its peak, Wish looked like the definition of success. Headlines were calling it the future of e-commerce. Investors were celebrating the IPO, and the platform was raking in $2.5 billion in annual revenue. But under the surface, it was a different story, a darker, messier, more chaotic one. Because Wish wasn't making money, it was losing it badly. Their profit margins weren't just negative, they were negative 100%. That means for every dollar they made, they were spending $2. You'd think someone would pull the brakes, but instead they pushed harder. The entire business model ran on digital ads, endless campaigns on Facebook, Instagram, and Google. And they weren't small campaigns. Wish was one of the biggest ad buyers in the world. All to keep those clickbait ads in your face. Fake AirPods, suspicious beauty creams, smartwatches for $1. The strategy was simple: get attention, flood the feed, and let the curiosity do the work. And it worked. Until it didn't. Then came 2020. The pandemic hit. Retail stores went dark. E-commerce went through the roof. Great news, right? Not for Wish, because everyone else started flooding the ad space too. Overnight, the cost of running ads exploded. More brands meant more competition. And suddenly, Wish, the company that depended on cheap digital ads, couldn't even afford to stay in the game. But here's the worst part. Their users didn't love Wish. They loved the prices. The absurd, too good to be true deals. And the moment those deals slowed down, the users vanished. What was left was a hollow marketplace, filled with shady sellers and broken promises. Customers were sharing horror stories, ordering a $70 tablet and getting a plastic phone stand with a note that said, "Coming," which of course never did. Scam stores were everywhere, and Wish either couldn't stop them or didn't want to. Some vendors used bait-and-switch tactics, promoting real products to earn 5-star reviews, then quietly replacing them with cheap knockoffs. But the most disturbing part? One of the worst scams was created by Wish themselves. A fake store called Best Deal 9 was launched internally to track whether customers would actually complain if their orders never arrived. And over 213,000 people placed orders before it was finally removed. Employees warned executives, called it unethical and illegal, and were ignored for months. Think about that. A billion-dollar company running experiments that literally scammed its own users. That's when the tide really started to turn. The public lost trust. The brand turned toxic. People stopped clicking the ads, stopped downloading the app, and most importantly, stopped spending money. And all of this was happening while newer, faster, and far richer competition was just around the corner, waiting to strike. By the time Wish understood just how deep the hole was, it was already standing in it. In 2022, a new competitor stormed onto the scene. Temu, another ultra-cheap, ad-driven shopping app backed by a $100 billion giant, Pinduoduo. But Temu didn't just copy Wish's playbook, it rewrote it. Their app looked cleaner, their products seemed more reliable, and their delivery was faster. And unlike Wish, Temu actually had customer support. While Wish customers were still waiting 3 months to hear back about a $2 refund, Temu was running 2 ads during the Super Bowl, just 5 months after launching. That made them the youngest brand in history to appear in the most expensive ad slot on television. They weren't just competing. They were announcing their dominance to the world. And Wish, it couldn't even fight back. Its entire growth engine had already collapsed. The ad prices were too high, the user base was shrinking fast, and the public trust was gone. In 2020, Wish had over 100 million active users every month. By 2023, that number dropped to 12 million. New signups dried up too, from over 100 million a year to just 5 million. It was a freefall. Internally, the company began laying off staff and looking for a buyer. But it didn't get another $10 billion offer. It didn't even get $1 billion. In early 2024, Wish was sold for just $173 million. A humiliating collapse for what was once Silicon Valley's golden child. The buyer? A Southeast Asian platform called Qoo10, which, in a twist of irony, would go bankrupt themselves by the end of the same year. So there it was. Wish, the app that once dominated the internet, that turned down a secret meeting offer from Jeff Bezos himself, was now gone. From $14 billion to scraps. From internet fame to total irrelevance. From IPO headlines to a footnote in tech history. And the saddest part? It didn't have to end this way. But when you build a company on clicks instead of trust and chaos instead of care, you don't get a happy ending. You get swallowed. Still, the story wasn't quite over, because the founder who built Wish and watched it crash was already planning his next move. And what he did next might surprise you. When Wish was sold off for pennies, it wasn't the end of the company, at least, not technically. You see, Wish was just the platform. The parent company behind it was called Context Logic, and it still existed, just with no real business left. What they did have, though, was something unusual, a giant tax write-off. Because Context Logic had lost so much money over the years, over $1 billion in net losses, they now had a unique asset. The right to not pay taxes on any future profits. That's right. If they could find any way to start a new business under that corporate shell, those massive losses would give them a head start. In the first quarter of 2025, the company reported a net loss of just $4 million, a huge improvement over the $59 million loss from the same time the year before. But still, they weren't making money. They were drifting, a ghost of a company that once promised to change online shopping forever. And as for Piotr Szulczewski, the man who once turned down Jeff Bezos and stood at the center of one of tech's strangest stories, he quietly stepped down as CEO after the collapse and disappeared from the spotlight. No press tours, no apologies, no LinkedIn announcements. But behind the scenes, he was already building something new, a company called MAGI Inc. Not much is known about it. The website is vague, the mission is unclear. And maybe that's the point. Maybe after the wild ride of Wish, the lawsuits, the headlines, and the public fallout, Piotr was done with being a household name. Or maybe he's just waiting for the next algorithm to change the game. Either way, what started as a dream to turn user data into digital gold ended as a brutal reminder that clicks don't equal loyalty, and growth isn't the same as success. In the end, Wish didn't fail because it was weird. It failed because it forgot something basic. People will only stick around if you give them a reason to trust you. So now you know what happened to Wish, the company that flooded your feed, turned down billions, and then vanished into digital dust. But this isn't just a story about one app, it's a warning. Because in the rush to scale fast, cut corners, and chase clicks, they forgot the one thing that actually builds a lasting business: trust. And when the clicks stopped coming, so did everything else. If you've made it this far, then you probably care about how companies rise and how they fall. We dig into stories like this every week, and trust me, some of them are even crazier. So if you want to keep learning how the digital world really works, the good, the bad, and the bankrupt, hit that subscribe button. You're already smarter than most. Might as well make it official.